Yeah,
putting
it's
people
in a
at
very
risk.
same way. It would be like the videos of those adults who capture the foul balls and steal it out of the hands of the child, right? Welcome to Splintered Spirits, a podcast hosted by me, Gary, and my nephew, John Santa from Santa Paranormal, where I follow Johnny as he tries to prove his theory that ghosts are the fractured memories of the living. Today we're joined by someone who has spent years chasing mysteries that blur the line between science, myth, and the unknown. Mark Marinaccio is an executive producer and showrunner best known for his work on The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, where he guided the series through one of its most ambitious seasons. Mark comes from a family that set the stage for this kind of work. His mom is a sensitive, often described as a psychic, and his dad is a lifelong sci-fi fan. That mix of intuition and imagination runs through his career. Mark cut his teeth as a producer on the original Ghost Hunters series, then stepped into the heart of Skinwalker Ranch to oversee experiments that tested the limits of science and storytelling. His work has redefined how we see the paranormal on television and has positioned him as a leading voice in chronicling the unexplained. We'll talk to him about what it takes to capture the unfilmable, how he balances science and scares in his own storytelling, and how his own background and intuitions inform the way he approaches the unknown. Let's dive into the conversation.
War soldier that the ghost hunters caught years ago.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see if I get lucky enough.
We're talking
Hopefully.
about Gettysburg. It seems like, Mark, we've trying to figure out like what the seven wonders of the paranormal world are. Gettysburg seems to be one of those top places, and you're, as a producer looking for places to shoot, what would you say the top ghost or paranormal spots outside of the ones you've done, or what are including the ones you've done? What would you say they are?
Well, I think that when I started out in the paranormal TV world, my very first shoot was in Ireland with ghost hunters, and we did a place called Lep Castle, which was built in something like year 100 by the Druids, and that was my very first time out, on the show and on a real ghost hunt investigation. And it's the kind of place where, and I've experienced this multiple places since then, where you walk through the door and you just feel like you want to throw up, right? I mean, it's just so thick and heavy, with just horrors that occurred there. And that place, gave me the creeps. And, Gary, as a producer,
Because they're Irish.
Right, of course, right. Because of the food, really, being Italian, it was the food that did it for me. I was like, I can't eat this stuff.
I get it.
Now, as a producer, that you're trying to make sure you capture whatever's going on, but me being who I am and my background and where I come from, I can't help but be sensitive to it, which I ultimately, and we can get into it, I ultimately turned into my skill set, which made me good at what I do. But Lep Castle was crazy. I think Estes Park and the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, where Stephen King got the inspiration for The Shining.
That was on the list. Yeah,
I produced the first Ghost Hunters live there. It was my first time there. That's where I had my first experience doing the shows. That place is like a playground. But there are places that I think have such a wide variety of strange occurrences. I mean, Skinwalker Ranch is a place I tried to get to for 15 years.
Yeah, we're going to get into that one too in a deep way for sure.
Yeah. I mean, places I haven't been that I'd like to go investigate in this way. The pyramids in Egypt. I think that for some reason there's something really interesting there. Any kind of ancient temples like Angkor Wat. There's a theory that about structures being built in quote unquote power centers, which may open the doors, let's say, or thin the walls or open the windows to these experiences more than others. Places I haven't been that I don't ever want to go to, Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Like, I am not interested in that place. I did Penhurst Asylum for World's Biggest Ghost Hunt, spent 2 weeks there. And, there wasn't enough showering I could ever do to feel clean after that. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Silkwood.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
Like trying to
Look,
like,
I'm
yeah,
clean.
right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what it felt like in a place like that.
Well, is that why don't you want to go to Waverly? What is it? Because that you go in there, it's so haunted that it's going to stick to you.
I don't like the way I physically feel when I'm in those locations.
I see. Okay.
It's very uncomfortable. It's like I said, I literally feel nauseous, like I want to throw up, and like
Got it.
I'm being worked over.
Wow.
It's just you get a high level of just physical and mental exhaustion. And that's not everybody, but that's certainly me. And like I said, I used it as a skill to my advantage throughout my career. But I get even here where I'm at now in Amelia Island, there's a quote unquote haunted bookstore, and I went over there and I was like, what's the deal? Haunted? And they're like, oh yeah, here's the stories. People see this little girl. I'm like, well, where is it? Upstairs. I'm like, let's go up there. Walk up the old wooden creaky steps to like the loft. And I'm not joking you. Halfway up the stairs, like I was like, ooh. And the woman that's with me was like, oh my God, she could see on my arm full of goosebumps and all the hair standing up. And similar feeling to the Lizzie Borden house, right?
That's a good
Just
spot. We didn't think of that spot. Sure.
that place. I mean, they're fun, right? But I don't, you don't need a place to have had horrific tragedy to have some sort of paranormal or anomalous activity,
Mark,
right?
do you think you get this feeling? Did this come from your mom
Yeah,
on that side of the family?
absolutely. Yeah. And my mom, and I don't know, John, if you know this, but um, my mother is in the 70s just called it psychic, right? And it's not something I really even knew about until I was 7 or 8 years old. But she's always been sensitive, psychic. I mean, she practiced it not for money, but with a group, and she would meditate and um, find lost things. She got real bad migraines all the time, and literally the light bulbs would blow out. Electronics don't work for her. She became a hands-on Reiki healer and practitioner and passed that on. But she would, always see the spirits of where we lived. And when I moved to Philadelphia from New Jersey, we lived in like 100-plus-year-old house, and she would see the people. She would do past lives regression, and she would do astral projection. And she's in her 80s now, so she's still very sensitive to things. But back then, it was like it was heightened. And then my dad, although he was a businessman who worked in Manhattan, loved science fiction television. And so I grew up with a psychic mom and a sci-fi loving dad. And I often tell people I never stood a chance to do anything else other than what I do for a
Right.
living.
Right.
But
And
yeah, it
how is
absolutely came from her.
it's really funny because we met another buddy of mine is I did an interview with, I don't know if you know Mike Dorsey. He's a documentarian. He actually used to work for me over at Discovery, but he's like comes from a different sort. His background is like hardcore doc, almost. I don't want to say news, but it's really sort of historical documentary, right?
Mm-hmm.
A truth telling, investigative place. You're coming from a background as a believer, as really sort of been in that world, though, right?
Yeah, experiencer. I mean,
Okay, an experiencer. So
Yeah.
what do you do? How did that? How do you bring that into a television production when you got to deal with what's real and deliver against network notes?
Right. So, it's important to understand that I became a storyteller because of my interest in the unexplained and science fiction. I didn't intend to do the unscripted world, but my interests were always in creating, let's say science fiction or the paranormal-esque television series. I mean, that was I always, when the internet came out, I built a file on UFO and aliens like on day one. It's always been my interest in sort of the reality of the unknown, um, and using my pursuit of being a storyteller to be able to understand, uncover, explain some of these things. So when I got the chance to just jump into Ghost Hunters, I was obviously very excited about like, I'm going to go see a ghost. But one of my
Right.
skills has always been, and I've always told, you know, uh, networks and producers this, I don't need to fake anything. It's not necessary because, especially when you do it for so long, I'm consistently the only, producer, showrunner, creator who's never left the paranormal. And been doing it for, 25 years now, let's say, almost 25 years specifically in that genre. So it's a really good skill developed over time where I can look at data first and foremost, look at the information to set up the best chance of success, right? So the location, types of occurrences, frequency, most recent atmospheric conditions during that, history, history of people investigating or sort of causing phenomenon to happen, let's say, how they did it, what were the tools. And I just have a very natural instinct to see those patterns and put them together and repeat them. Like, for instance, Skinwalker Ranch. I went on to that show in season 3. And I noticed, again, I read George Knapp and Com Kelleher's book in 2005, and I was obsessed and tried for 15 years to get there. And then when they asked me to run the show, I said, "Oh yeah, hell yeah, that's the only show I'll go back in the field for." But not only the study and the information that was available from prior to the show, but the 2 seasons they had, I went in and asked, "Hey, I see some things that seem to trigger phenomena that you do. First of all, is it real? Or was it for TV?" And they're like, "Nope, everything was real," which, to their credit, nothing at all on that show, not a single thing gets faked whatsoever. And a lot of stuff just doesn't even get shown that can't be shown or that's not part of the story. So first and foremost, that's what's going on. And then, but it's also led by legit scientists who are not going to, get woo woo on something because they got to go down a path that's got potential to be measurable, right? If you're not going to be able to formulate an experiment, to conduct an experiment to gather data, that potentially is repeatable or leads you somewhere else, it's not worth it. So, one of the first things I noticed was just how rockets seem to trigger phenomenon when they're shot into the anomaly above the triangle. And that was something that Travis Taylor was very, very keen on and big on and loved doing. And it was great that we were able to just lean into that, and it triggered phenomena. Now in other projects, I'll walk into a room and just feel like I got punched in the stomach, and then my eyes will water, and I'll get the tingles and goosebumps, and I'll say, "Get the cameras up," um, and things happen and then get caught. Um, but going back to setting yourself up for the best chance of success, knowing how you produce those things, oftentimes when you're making, let's say, sales tapes or even pilots with new companies that don't do this sort of thing, there's way too many people in the space. And it's like, no, we have to be minimal footprint. We have to be quiet. Get everybody out who doesn't need to be here. No fumbling, no ACs running around following the camera. Like, you just can't do that. It's got to be,
That's an assistant cameraman for anybody who doesn't know what he's.
yeah, you can't have people running and following. And of course, everybody wants to kind of follow around because it's like, oh, I want to see what happens. But generally, and I learned this on Ghost Hunters, it was a camera operator, the 2 lead investigators, myself, and an audio guy. And the audio guy almost always was outside of at least the room, if not the building, when he could be. And it was just us in the space all the time. And you take time. Nothing can be rushed.
Mark, is there a difference in how you approach a show, like from what you learned on Ghost Hunters to a Skinwalker Ranch, and these different it's like, for example, is it a different, since we're dealing with like a different spirit or a different aliens versus, is there a different approach to capturing this stuff?
Yeah, I think that for me, what I've learned over the years is whether you're talking about ghosts, aliens, monsters, UFOs, in a way, it's all the same thing. It's these temporary windows or doorways um, to other spaces, places, or times, let's say. So, first, it's about where you are. And is that environment active in that way? Does it have the potential for that door or window to open, let's just say. So the approach is the same in that respect. But again, on Skinwalker Ranch, it was like I said, a scientific investigation. Whereas in ghost hunting, it's okay to use non-scientific tools to help point you in a direction, right? So, you may want validation in a ghost hunt that you're communicating with a spirit by getting that spirit to give you information that you find is accurate in public record. Um, Skinwalker Ranch, we know the history, we know all the records, know all that stuff. You're not trying to get information from someone or something else in that way. You're trying to collect data and understand the science, because I do believe it is all science we don't understand. Um, so that's one difference. But now when you talk about the more traditional paranormal, and I even, this was even the case for my last show, Alien Encounters Fact or Fiction. There's an emotional story, that a personal story, that a human story that's very important, because I have two goals to accomplish when I'm making those shows. The first is obviously the promise I make to the audience as to what we're going to try to deliver on, understanding, explanations, answers, progress in the field. The second is to the people that are taking the risk of sharing their story. One thing I'm very proud of is when I started on Ghost Hunters, people were still very, skeptical and resistant to come on the show. They didn't want the ridicule. They didn't want the attention. They didn't want to risk their job or their social circle or something. By the time I finished, after 3 seasons on that show, by the time I finished, if you said you had a haunted house, you had a line of people outside your door waiting to get in and check it out. And so I really tried to do the same thing with the alien abduction, alien encounter, UFO phenomena. How do you not feel or get called crazy when you don't know that you're not the only one with that same story? And by the more that I give people a platform to share their stories, not only is it cathartic for them, and I hope therapeutic, which I believe it is, but also it reduces the chances of ridicule, and it opens the door for more people to come forward. So those are always my two goals.
Mark, what are some storytelling, and for lack of a better word, as a producer, tricks, so that so the audience really, the audience can experience your gut, your stomach feeling like it's punched, other than you saying it, which then that's what creates this idea of, well, is he full of shit or not? So what are some things that you do when you're in the field, when you have great moments, human moments of people experiencing something that aren't very visual? How do you do that for a TV show?
I have to know the tools that would be best suited to go from this is how I feel to let's capture, measure, or interact. That's what it is. So, as an example, on Ghost Hunters International, we were at this old pub in England, like, I don't know, everything's the oldest place in the world, right? So, oldest pub in England, I forget. It was like a little haunted village. And we had our lunch break, which is, really past dinner time. For people that don't know, when you're doing any shoot, 5 or 6 hours into the shoot, you break for lunch. It's called lunch no matter what time of day, because it's the first meal, the first break for a meal. And so we had taken our break, and I was finished. I always sort of finish early because I'm getting my ducks in a row, looking at my notes, looking at what the plan is for where we're going to go next, and what's with the team, what's going to be focused on. And I walked back into the bar where we had just been, and one of the scenarios where I felt like I got just sick and my eyes started to water, and I saw what was like atmospheric energy haze kind of come in and move past the beer taps. And I said, everybody up, guys, get in here, get the cameras up, something's going down, grab the EMF meter, right? And the reason I said that specifically was not just to say, oh yeah, there's weird energy up in the air, but it's a good question and answer device, right? And
For
based on the
TV.
stories,
Right.
for
Especially
TV,
for TV, you could see it.
you could see it and you could hear it, right? Like a needle moves, it blinks, it beeps, whatever, it does all the things. But more importantly, you don't have to be with it. And I'll tell you why that's important. So, um, the story there was this guy, Will the Bailiff, who was really intimidating and would sit people down in a chair and say, "You're going to pay your taxes, right?" And that's sort of the area where he would sit people down that we focused. And so the decision was to place the EMF meter on a chair right in that spot, and everybody gets out of the bar. We set up cameras on tripods at the very opposite end of the room and zoomed in on the EMF meter and then an overview of the whole space. And this is important to eliminate the potential for it to be radio signals, walkie-talkies, just anything that we brought that's making it go off. And set up monitors and literally sat in the other room while the investigators asked questions and got responses that were accurate. And this went on so long, went on for like an hour and a half, that all of us asked questions. It became fun. The crew, the PAs were like, "Hey, what about this?" And you would get answers that were, you can validate. So one of the tricks or, tools, I guess, is, what's gonna be visually a good signaling that something's going on. Spirit boxes are great, but they're really difficult for TV because it's just like John. It's just constant noise,
Right.
which is why the Estes method works so well, which is where
Yeah.
the person putting this listening to the spirit box has headphones on.
Yeah.
And so nobody else could hear what the spirit box is saying. And then somebody else asks questions to the spirits. And the person with the headphones on who can't hear the questions repeats what the spirit box says.
Now, I'm going to stop. First of all, that's the second best answer to the or equally as good of an answer to the Estes method. So John and I talk about the Estes method a lot because I think it's ridiculous. I've always thought it looks silly as hell. Like I never understood there's a middleman. So it's like if you're a skeptic or something, and you have somebody in blindfolded headphones and they're plugged into the spirit box, and I ask them someone else asks the question, and then they just say words, it's like, how am I? Why don't I just hear the ghost? Well, hold on, let me finish. So it's like, why am I listening to the middleman? And we had another guest come on who gave a great answer for why she does it a lot. Another ghost investigator. And it was like to avoid any pareidolia or outside influence to what you're hearing, which I thought was genius. And then what you're saying makes total sense because from a visual television perspective, it looks wild, and you don't have the audio problems of garbage when you're trying to edit and all this and everything else. So okay, I'm starting to slowly understand why people do this thing.
But there's you also you have to be true to the investigation. So they're noise canceling headphones, right? So there's no way that the person listening to the spirit box can hear the questions being answered. But you also record the audio of the spirit box independently.
Yeah, you have to have a splitter on there.
So that in the edit you can play that, but you control the volume and the ducking so that it's not over everybody's audio. You're controlling it so that you can still show that it really was said on the box.
Right.
But those are like I love that kind of stuff, but I like visuals. I love visuals. That's my jam.
Well, it's a visual medium.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel like EVP and audio is great, and it's valuable, and it's more prevalent as far as the type of evidence you get. So you have to incorporate it, but there's always something that's available, that beeps or goes off, or when the Xbox Connect was being used all the time, you're looking at nothing, but it shows a skeleton figure. Used in the right way and in certain environments, you could be like, whoa, it's super creepy. REM pods, directional sensors. Something that I like what people do is you put up, almost like EMF trip wires So when something crosses its path, it goes off. Because also what you can do in the edit is you can build a map from these things, showing where they're going off and what it's building, or you can, you can actually take some of the information and convert it to be more easily seen and understood. I like those sorts of things. The night vision, thermal imaging, they're always great. I'm not, it's hard for me to really dive into thermal imaging and night vision as being more valuable for the investigation than other things. Um, but
Now, is it when you say valuable for the investigation or valuable for the show? I think those are
investigation,
two separate things.
investigation,
Okay.
very valuable for the show.
Right.
It's
Right.
creepy. It's creepy. It sets the mood, and it's important for the show because it's not just it is trying to present that vibe of creepiness and fear, but because that's the most accurate way to capture what the investigators are experiencing. They are walking around in the pure dark in an environment unknown, and so the night vision really does help bring as best of a first person perspective that you can get. But I like photography. I think that film photography, is still incredibly valuable, and you know, you can process the image, the negative in different ways, and then the print in different ways to eliminate um, certain levels of light spectrum. You can use infrared photography. You can use um, red lighting that slows down the visual wavelength, so that you may capture something. But I think some of the best visual evidence I've ever seen has been captured on film. And this is where the ghost and alien realms sort of coincide, or sort of connect, which leads me more to my sort of belief of interdimensional or transdimensional travel or entity versus dead Uncle Joe who
John just got
died.
a little excited when you said that, but we'll get
Just
into.
a
I
little
want to get
bit.
into all that.
Part.
Just a little bit.
He got a little excited. I know him well enough that he was like, he just perked up a little. He's got a
Little
little.
Well, I'll
bit.
give you an example.
Yeah.
We
Went from
in
6 to
ghost
midnight.
hunting.
Yeah.
Well, in ghost hunting, you see or hear about shadow figures all the time. And it's a very unique phenomenon in ghost hunting relative to, full body apparitions, partial apparitions, something that has detail. I mean, we're talking pure black silhouette, but with mass. Um, I have a picture from an investigation done in the Hudson Valley, which was a UFOs, alien invasion Hudson Valley.
What were you going
Huge
after? What were you going after the Hudson Valley boomerang?
with everything
Everything.
you can imagine in
Yeah.
the Hudson Valley, but more so looking for the why, the connections, the spaces, and found a place that had every sort of paranormal experience you could imagine all in one old house, and multi-generational. And they had a picture of what they thought was, I don't know, a ghost or something, um, which looked like a shadow figure sort of barely creeping out from behind a wall into a doorway. Shit you not. This thing looked like a tall gray alien more than any other image I've ever seen of a ghost or an alien or whatever. And it gave me the creeps. And, you know, it was in line with the experiences there, but it was captured on film. The bookstore I mentioned down the street, they have a picture up of that second floor, the haunted area, that looks like a giant plasma ball. And, it's a printout, right, on computer paper. And I'm like, I'd like to get an idea of this, I don't know. And then I look above it and there's the original print from a negative of it. And and this is something I'm like, who took this? Like, well, I got to find out. Like, we don't really know. It's old. I'm like, when? They're like, oh, I don't know. Like, you got to find out because this we'll call it an orb, was large, first of all. But it had mass. It had parts of it you could see through, and parts of it you could not see through. And it had what looked like movement of energy, so different colorations. It had, a bit of a ring around it of light. There was a light splash. It looked like it was actually pushing a wave of light out, which, like, maybe it's a lens flare, but I know enough to tell them that that's actually not.
Did it have a nuclei by any chance? Like a center?
It I'm not sure that I would say that. I say that there could be a more dense part of it that wasn't, but not positioned in the center from the camera's perspective, but it looked like there could be a convergence point. I think blowing it up more maybe look, but I said, like, look, if this could be verified as not being faked, which isn't that difficult. I've never seen anything like this in 25 years. This could be the most astounding piece of evidence sitting in a bookstore in a tiny island in Florida that anyone's ever seen.
That's wild.
Yeah,
that is wild.
It's funny you bring up grays, right? There was a time, I'm on TikTok mainly. There was a time when I was constantly getting banned, and I'd have to create another account to go live. And what I would do is I create these videos where saying, hey, make sure you're following me over here, my backup account, which I don't have anymore. But hey, follow me over here. So I'm doing a video, and I have a mirror in back of me from a Victorian house. It's like a door mirror. And all of a sudden, now, not trying to do anything paranormal. Nothing's going. I don't have a spirit box going. Nothing. I'm just saying, hey, everybody, please come over to here and watch me tonight, because I'm not going to be on this account. All of a sudden, the audience can already see it. It's almost like a selfie shot, right? They can already see it in the mirror. I don't notice it until it moves, and it directly looks right at me. I can only describe what I saw in this video and in this mirror as a tall gray. That's the only way I can describe it. If you saw it, you'd be like,
I want to see it, first of all. I definitely want to see it.
I'll find the video. I think I still have it on my page, so I'll be able to pull it up. But it is just, and you see it, like, and what's crazy too is I am moving back and forth. Okay, one can argue, oh, it's just light reflecting in the mirror, but when I'm standing still is when you see it turn its head and look right at me.
Yeah, and by the way, that's an easy thing to determine just based on having multiple sort of images in a shot to see if it's one moving with the other or not.
One moving, yep. So it was pretty wild. So the whole alien spirit phenomenon is like, a lot of people, some people get religious with it, like, oh, the aliens are demons. I'm sure you've heard that before. Which
a lot of people like
cool.
their demons.
Yeah, a lot of people like their demons.
There's
with my documentation, I'm coming across.
Belief, though. There's a really good reason for that belief. That's a longer conversation. But go ahead.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know there is, and it's wild. It is a wild conversation, but it's funny how it does intermix. It really does.
Where were you when you caught that? Where was this? What was the location?
So the location where I caught that is called Wesley Manor, and it has a huge history. It was an outpost in the 1700s that got destroyed by the British during the Revolutionary War. The Battle of White Plains took out the whole area. Then it got turned into a Victorian mansion, and then after that, it was a temporary hospital for the Spanish flu, and then an experimental hospital that they ran experiments on, like, in the 30s, and then it turned into an apartment building, and it's been an apartment building ever since.
Do you know what the very first either structure or use or gathering or settlement was for that location?
Yes. Yeah, and the walls are still there. So they built it upon. They built the Victorian mansion on the outpost. So there's still the old fieldstone walls in the basement next
what was
to
there before the outpost?
It was native land.
Okay. Was the location where the outpost used by the indigenous people for any specific purpose?
Yes.
What did they use it for?
Yes. So because of its height advantage, it was almost used as a not like an outpost for them, but what they used to do is make these roads that would interconnect, and that was a spot where they would a lot of the roads would connect, almost like a meeting ground, if you will.
So, I would suggest that whoever the indigenous people were, if they were not the original inhabitants of that land, there were people before them that focused on that spot as well. And this is the reason I ask is there's the theory of power centers. There's Patrick Jackson who talked about it, a British guy. But when I was even in Hudson Valley, we found places that were important to, like, let's say again, I think the Druids or somebody, which is like how'd they get over there, whatever. But areas, let's say, where crops grow twice as tall as any other spot, where there's a practical value to early people to that specific location. Then as sort of humans progress, other people find other value in that area, wind up taking it over. These become ritualistic sites, prayer sites, temples, churches, and others continue to come, see value in it, take it, build on top of it, et cetera, until wherever you're at now was not at all what was there before. But the reasoning why everyone focused on that is the same. It had a certain level of, let's say, power or energy, perhaps unseen, definitely not understood, but depending on how far back you go, had practical value until
Portal, Nexus.
Nexus, yes, and that's another thing. The spirits talk about something called the Nexus portal.
Yeah, but then
there.
It becomes churches and temples and prayer sites, because then it becomes a bit more esoteric or metaphysical value of
Mark. When you say Hudson Valley, you mean Hudson Valley, Westchester,
New York, Hudson
New
Valley,
York.
New York.
Okay, yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I'm in the lower Hudson Valley.
Is it Pinecrest, the UFO capital of the world? I think it's
Yeah.
Pinecrest or yeah. We were all over that area, and it just
Sleepy
really
Hollow, Buckout, all the Hudson Valley has it all.
it's got an
Poughkeepsie's got its
incredible
own,
history.
its own thing when you go up, up farther that way. Yeah, it's crazy.
The whole mystery of Tuxedo Park.
Love Tuxedo Park.
That really plays into the UFO phenomena, and I guess it was late 80s and early 90s, I think, right? The boomerang and all that. But
that's why if you go to Tuxedo Park and you go, say, the Renaissance Fair, because that's where the Renaissance Fair is located for New York, dude, you have the postmen walking around with shotguns, blasting, fake shots, saying that they're hunting aliens. That United States Postal Service, the other thing, dude, they play into the whole hit. It's funny,
They did a lot there, brought over scientists from Germany during the war and whatnot. But that's, if you follow the Hudson Valley, the Barney and Betty Hill story in New Hampshire really is, it's a Hudson Valley story. It's, way north of New Hampshire, but it's part of that entire connected stretch. And that, obviously that's one of the most incredible, or first, incredible UFO abduction stories. But the people we talked to, I mean, people who have never, we went and took over the town, and they gave us full access to, commissioners, mayor, and police chiefs who had stories that were like, they'd never told anybody before. And they broke down while telling these stories because it was just so jarring to everything they knew and understood practically and logically. And no matter how many decades passed, it's as if it was yesterday for them emotionally. We did an experiment with a guy on his farm that we got to sort of serendipitously. He was not interested. We ran into his son on the streets, who his buddy told us about what his friend's dad's farm had experienced. And we went out there, and he let us, he missing time and a weird sound, and we were able to recreate the sound and try to blast it in the sky, and he wound up walking out of the woods like a zombie when he heard the sound and didn't know why. Really strange things. And then he's a really private guy, but winds up telling us how he used to have tenants on the other side of the farm. And one night, they just packed up and left. You never knew why. And then he was also, the farm owner was also a long haul trucker, and he ran into the father of the family on a route once in another state and said, why'd you guys leave? What happened? And the father told him that they constantly would wake up to gray aliens in their bedroom. And one night he got so freaked out by it, he was like, "That's it, everyone, let's go, get out, everyone. What's wrong? Why are we leaving? Just we're moving. Grab what you can. We're out of here." And they took off. And it wasn't until a few days into their trip to where they were moving that he had two young daughters who said, "Daddy, we're really glad we moved from there. We just didn't like the little gray men in our room all the time."
Wow.
That kind of shit.
That's wild, man. That's so.
Mark,
let me ask you. So
go ahead.
Going into what you were saying about these, like, I don't want to say power centers, but I'm going to use that word just so these power places, right?
It's not understood science. There's no term for it.
So these power centers, especially talk about like the Hudson Valley. Do you think the Appalachian Mountains have anything to do with that? Because they run right through here. It's like that whole area, especially the farther up in the Hudson Valley you go, the higher up in the Appalachians you're going. If you're going towards the left, do you think that might have anything to do with it?
I don't know if it's causality, right? I don't know if they are just involved in the same circumstance or phenomena, or there's something more present or triggering there. It's really hard to say. I haven't studied Appalachia enough, Appalachian Mountains enough to say that it is a cause of anything necessarily.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, I want to ask you a couple more questions on just capturing this stuff, and then I want to get into your sort of this interdimensional theories you have. But as a storyteller, and I think a lot of our audience, look, there are a lot of as I like to say, ghost hunter babies out there on the internet. There's a lot of people who are out there, investigating. John will tell you he's not an investigator. He just documents. He really just goes out and just experiments and documents stuff, but he's not a full forced investigator like someone who's out there really using different techniques and different things. That's not his bag. But there are some who do, and they're getting it from the shows that arguably you helped make. What are they getting wrong? What are they getting right?
I think that I wouldn't ever say wrong. I think that what I learned first and foremost on Ghost Hunters, which was the most important part of all of this, is to absolutely seriously look for a rational and logical explanation for whatever occurs before jumping to any conclusions. That's really, really important. But that only comes with a certain type of knowledge. For those guys, for instance, they were plumbers. It was easy for them to figure out, like, if it was something like air in a pipe. So people sometimes some people, if they came into learning from TV shows later, there was not that level of debunking, let's say, or looking for a logical answer. And so people will tend to take anything that happens and then try to ascribe a paranormal definition to it. That's the problem, is any kind of bias, any kind of intent. You cannot, of course, when something happens, you want it to be paranormal. Everybody does. But if you don't first try to understand, is it potentially paranormal or not first, that's an issue. I think it gets sort of wrong. I think the other thing is, look, I don't even know if this is how true this is of people, but I would say always staying current with the field. What are people trying? What are they using? What is working? What kind of theories attached to actual science and explanations? Understanding the environment you're going into, in a way that you would normally not have before will help you to trigger or even capture activity. And so sometimes people will go places and be like, nothing happened, nothing happened, nothing happened. Well, it's good that you're not saying everything that you experienced was a ghost or paranormal, but are you sure nothing happened? Did you have the right tools? Did you look at the information or, the activity in the right way? So I think that there's a tendency to be a little black and white about it being something or not being something too early in the process. There should be no positive, negative.
Is there like a standardized data format that you would do like across every unexplained situation that, if you could standardize something, what would it be? Like, what would you tell these guys? Like, listen, you're going to go out and you're going to be a TikTok star and you're going to be a ghost hunter. This is what you should be doing. This is the standardized thing. Someone who's gone out and captured this shit. Here's what you should do for this format to make it feel that we know that it could be legitimate.
First of all, I think the most important thing is multiple days and nights on location. That's really important. I think the first thing you should do, no matter what, especially you start out in the daytime, is you spend time in the environment looking for sounds and movement that occur because of age, and location and weather. And so you clock that, right? Like, okay, whenever they turn on the hot water over there, these pipes always bang. There's always a garbage truck that goes down at 3 a.m. There's always a bar letting out that's far away, or when the clouds are there, sound travels from here or there. There's always a blinking light. Like, look for all of these things that you can categorize early on before you're like doing a quote unquote ghost hunt part of it, so that while you're in the investigation aspect, that 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 is something that is natural or part of the regular and the norm. So you can quickly dismiss it because, again, even if you could spend days, you have limited time. So if you go and chase down this sound and spend 6 hours with this sound only to then find out it was a banging pipe, you lost out on hours of investigation that would have potentially led to some actual evidence and documentation of legitimate, phenomena.
Is there anything that you ever found was a total waste? Like, this is just horseshit. Devices,
No.
tech, or any piece?
None. I don't think any of it is a waste. I think it's about the right equipment for the environment and the encounters, the encounters that have been have happened there or have been believed to have happened there. I think that's what's important. Going into every location with the exact same tools, I don't think makes sense.
All right, Mark, let's get into some real deep shit. What do you think spirits are?
Again, like I always have to preface this. Obviously, when people find out what I do, their first question is, "You believe in ghosts?" I'm
Of
like,
course.
"Look, we probably have very different definitions of the term, right?"
Tell me. You don't have to qualify. Don't give me the caveats. I want to know what Mark Marinaccio thinks. What are spirits?
Well, no, it's important because even the word spirit has a lot attached to it. Now, I will say this. My career and my personal interest has always been bringing the unexplained and the science together to create an explanation. That this is, science and religion, let's say, or spirituality were once converged and they broke apart. And I think that they need to come back. And I spent something I'm very proud of. I spent a year in development on a project about near-death experiences and their survivors. And what I learned from those firsthand accounts from those near-death experience survivors, and what I learned about quantum mechanics, specifically quantum entanglement, and then what I learned about consciousness, it's ridiculously obvious that there's a connection. And so spirit, Could be a lot of things. I don't think there's one answer. It could be many different, paranormal or phenomena, right? But what I think happens is, in almost every case of an experience, is there is a connection between the observer and the action, right? Let's call the action just stimuli, right? Whatever the encounter is, it's just stimuli. How are we interpreting that stimuli? How's the brain processing it? What do you see? How come one person could see a ghost and the other person can't, and they're in the same space? There's time manipulation. So what I believe is that, and if you don't know anything about quantum entanglement, which everyone does, but the interesting to me about quantum entanglement is that it proves that there is an unobservable universe on top of our observable universe, because our physics defines and is meant to understand our observable universe. We can only measure, study, and theorize what we can see or experience or read and measure. But quantum entanglement, gave us this idea that, well, we can't see the connection between the two things that affect each other. So it must exist outside of our observable universe. It's very, very basic and not really super accurate way to describe it. Let's just say a connection exists. From near-death experience survivors and their experiences, it mirrors this connection that then their consciousness, call it soul, whatever, has to, call it source, right? This is in strict, using basic sort of scientific terms or computer terms, when they're in the process of dying and this tether connects, it's as though not only is consciousness sort of going, but information, the information of their life and their experiences and everything is being fed back to
So wait,
some
hold
hard.
on. I got to dumb this down for this guy. So you're saying ghosts or spirits are a form of consciousness?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that what we are experiencing when you see that is a connection to something, someone, or somewhere else that's created through physics that we don't understand, or not even physics, science we don't understand. And I think that what we're experiencing and what we're seeing could be any one of the following. Dead Uncle Joe, who never moved on and has been hanging around to try to give a message or needs help to move on. Sure, possible. The impression that dead Uncle Joe left on the physical environment where he died. Every night, 11 o'clock, I see a figure walk down the hallway, disappearing on the wall. Well, for 70 years, Uncle Joe lived there.
That's like a classic haunting. That's what a haunting, like an imprint. An imprint, right?
Just an imprint. Okay. Intelligent would be interactive, like it's something trying to communicate with you. I've seen poltergeist activity, which seemed most likely to actually be young girls entering puberty, massive hormonal chemical changes in their body, but also their brains, and it actually manifests as things happening around them. I've seen and I've heard very detailed stories that suggest some sort of time slip, time dilation, where what you're seeing is what hasn't happened yet, what happens like the next night, but you're seeing it the night before, which is humans doing something next night. And what you're seeing the night before is that action, but not fully, engaged or developed, right? So you're seeing it's shadowy, it's distorted, it's, just movement of energy, but it's exactly what someone did who didn't know about that story the next night. I think that if you're interacting in a space that's connected, you could be interacting with scientists on the other side of the space trying to also understand it and experience and explain it, and they don't know what you are. I have a story I tell, which is, imagine this old lady who lives in a house by herself, and every day at 12 o'clock, she hears what sounds like children running up the stairs in her attic and laughing and giggling and thumping around and playing. And it just freaks her out because she opens the door and nobody's there. She asks some paranormal investigators to come over and look around, and they do an investigation. They say, yes, your house is absolutely haunted. There are spirits there. And she's like, they're freaking me out. What can I do? And they say, well, you have to let them know this is your house. And so next time you hear it, you stomp on those stairs, you walk up there, you bang on the wall, and you say, this is my house. You say, get out, get out. And you bang on the door while you're yelling, get out. Next time she hears it, gets up the courage, walks stairs, stomps a couple times, bangs on the wall, and says, get out. The sounds stop. They never come back, right? Now imagine in another space, place, or time, there are children that every day at noon after their mother fed them lunch, they went up to the attic to play. They go up there every day. That's their thing. That's their routine. That's what they do. And then one day while they're playing, they hear banging and a voice say, get out. And they never go back up there again. So my point to this is it's really important. What I believe is that time is the virus in the equation that needs to be removed to understand phenomena, because it's not necessarily that I believe a long time ago these kids were playing and now this woman's here. Yes, in our linear understanding of our existence, maybe, but those events are happening simultaneously.
Okay.
In reality.
Okay, I understand. I want to talk about one of those scenarios that you talked about, though, a little bit more specifically, and that's Uncle Joe.
Hold on.
Oh, go ahead.
Real quick, Gary. So, Mark, would you say that in everything that you just said, that there is a transfer of data happening on a quantum level?
I think, yes. What I think is that when you're in a space that has activity, what you're actually experiencing is you're experiencing, let's say, the other side, the other element, whatever you're seeing, experiencing, that is also experiencing you in real time in its space, place, or time, which when you look at sort of quantum physics, and understand time being an issue, let's say, we do this in Skinwalker Ranch all the time, space time. It's just space time. They're one just thing. It's not multiple things. It's a thing, not a period of duration. So what I think
it's the same, Mark, I'm sorry to cut you off. It's the same way of trying to explain to somebody that if I'm sitting in this spot and you're running by and we look up at the sky and we see something in outer space, say, billions and billions and trillions of miles away, we're seeing that object at two different times, even though we're running in the same spot. You're in the same spot, but I'm sitting and you're running. It's
physicists talk about that phenomenon all the time. You're looking exactly at the same pace, exactly at the same position, but movement, the speed and movement of the one person actually means that they're looking at it at a different time.
At a different time, yeah.
So, but honestly, I want to go back for a second to Uncle Joe, because you sort of took him and threw him into the side. Like, there's Uncle Joe who's, could be here waiting to send a message, and then you went on to these in-depth things. What's Uncle Joe? What is he?
So
is he part of this time transgression, or is there something else? Is that a different
I do a
definition?
lot of work with mediums and there's what they say, and my issue with not even issue, but I'm not sure yet that what a person is experiencing with dead Uncle Joe communicating is actually dead Uncle Joe communicating, because I just don't believe we exist fully in that form once we pass. Or is it what Uncle Joe impressed upon us and the environment? So Uncle Joe is always here, he's always here, and he may be in ways that we don't even understand. We're connected to him because of DNA, of consciousness, of whatever. And so dead Uncle Joe could be a projection from us of our communication or connection to what's left of dead Uncle Joe in the environment or in us once his body and the rest of his consciousness has moved on.
It's almost
John,
like
tell
our
him your theory.
memories.
What ghosts are.
It's almost like our memories are what you're describing is like our memories of Uncle Joe are basically helping recreate the man.
Well, yeah. So
In a way,
In
not
a
to
way,
discount
yeah, in a way.
that there's importance and value and there's something that exists, but in a way, that connection between dead Uncle Joe's, memory and the energy he left, the impression, his genetics, all of those things, I think, come together to create that sighting and that encounter.
So the theory we play off of on Splintered Spirits is really, and based on John's theory is, that spirits, one theory, is that spirits are the fractured memories of the living. Basically, we all have electricity in us. We all have energy in us. We certainly don't know how consciousness works, but we know that energy in the synapses are flying around in our brain. And when these meat sacks go, that energy has to go somewhere. It can't be created or destroyed. Is it our memories and consciousness possibly attached to that energy? That is something that we talk about a lot, and as possibly as what are spirits, right? It's the memories that we're interacting with of the past.
Partially, I'll say yes. I did. I think that absolutely a reasonable, definition as much as many others are, but if not more. Two things I'll say. Philip Dick used to talk about this, a science fiction author, where he, realized one day that his dreams weren't dreams, but they were him watching the other versions of him in parallel universes and worlds and dimensions, and he was, bringing back the memory of that and creating stories out of it. And I say that because, in studying death and near death, scientists looked, and there's a lot of new, let's say, I don't know, evidence or theory about where consciousness lives in the brain. And there's tubules and have maybe qubits in him. Right? I think it's qubits, which is what we used or what Google used to make Willow, the quantum computer that solved an equation by potentially accessing other versions of itself in other universes.
In other universes.
So,
Yep.
right. So,
Yeah.
This is where we get to consciousness, quantum entanglement, quantum place. I think that a big part of consciousness is this connection that we're making to all versions of us.
Well, it's fascinating, dude. I
agree with you 100%, Mark. That is like, it's huge. It's when you really think about it. I like what you said before about, now, hold on. I need to alliterate this. It's very important. When I document, I take spiritualism and religion out, right? And I look at just from a logical perspective. I do that for a couple of reasons, but mainly just for a different perspective. We already have the religious. We already have the spiritualism. Hey, what happens when an atheist comes out here and do this? Let's see what happens, right? That's the whole gist. However, there's a point where religion, spiritualism, and science, comes together. And you were speaking about that. And then something else you were talking about with the sci-fi aspect of it. I mean, let's be real. The only real, fiction that becomes nonfiction is science fiction. At the end of the day, that's what we have fridge that they talk to us. Hey, your milk's gonna go bad. Like soon we're gonna have replicators and people are gonna argue what's better, the processed replication or the actual processed food.
Yeah, and I think I don't think this is what you're saying that you're not doing, but I think that spirituality and religion are an important part of investigating and understanding and processing, but perhaps not in the way that we've been taught or meant to believe. Look at it more like what can be extracted and rewritten in terms that are more advanced than at the time, let's say, the Bible was written. If you wanted to say, I believe everything that's in the Bible, that seems like a miracle and mystical and crazy and all that were true. But take it out of the time period, take the people out of it, take out the lesson that is imparted on you because of it, then you'd start drawing parallels to other phenomena that, and then the science of those phenomena that you'd say, okay, wait a minute, maybe it's just, man has written it in a way that detaches it from where we are right now too far.
Well, what you're talking about also, by the way, guys, is what past life regressionists believe. Absolutely, 100%. Past life is a misnomer, actually, as I've come to learn. They are of the mindset of everything, everywhere, all at once. Yeah. We are all on different timelines, traveling at the same time. You're not looking at yourself in the past. You're looking at yourself on another timeline that is happening right now at the same, or, it's a very different thing, leading to there is a higher self that controls all of this, and that leads to spirit guides, people that are these other entities of some kind in this other space that could potentially be helping you make decisions, whether you know it or not. But it's this idea of we are not in a time, in any given time, at any given time.
I think one of the best practical understandings of that is you look at emotional issues, PTSD, for instance, flashbacks, or any other emotional issues where you are experiencing the pain of something as though it's happening to you right now, even though it happened in the past. What in our chemistry and our makeup and our brain allows us to feel as though it's happening right now, even though we see it as having happened in the past. And science fiction would always say, well, you still exist there. You're still experiencing it. Right. And that's to the same point,
Yeah.
but we know this on an absolute scientific level that we experience things that our brain cannot determine, separate from right now or having happened in the past.
It's like deja vu. It's like deja vu. I try to explain to people that the best evidence for our multiversal selves is deja vu. At that moment in time, a lot of us are all resonating with ourselves in the multiverse. And it's like, wait a minute, I've done this before. I said this before, but I didn't. Well, time might be a little different where the other you is. You know what I mean? So, and that gets into the past life regression and, all that.
Maybe deja vu is when multiple, universes, timelines, dimensions, whatever you want to call them, are intersecting or two are crossing at the same point. So, you're both about to or experiencing the same thing, but because it's happening it's like the idea of like, you can never, if you go back in the future, you can never let your old self see your new self or you'll explode.
Yeah, right.
I mean, maybe deja vu is a simplified, less dangerous version of that. You're experiencing the same thing as the other you at the same time. So you're just super interconnected for a moment. There's an emerging theory, which is incredible, that, there was this period where the human head grew to twice its size in like 100,000 year period, which is unheard of. It takes much longer than that, but they see that in just this 100,000 year period, the size of the human head, the size of the brain doubled.
Oh, and the magic ape theory, right? You're talking about the magic ape theory.
No, this is when, I don't think it was apes. This was a form of human, right?
Oh, yeah. The primate magic theory or whatever.
They found it was, it was man. When they found mushrooms and began to ingest them, in small amounts, heightened their ability to hunt. So right away, they're hunting better and they're providing more protein, which is feeding the brain. And then a little bit larger amounts created stronger bonds between man and woman for procreation and progression. Larger amounts created more of a cohesion of community. So they started forming groups that stuck together, right? Which then increased the amount of hunting and food and protein. And then very large amounts is what introduced abstract thought in a way, right? And all of those things combined with the protein, the fuel, so the brain firing neurons and synapses in ways it never did before, plus it's getting fuel to build it like a muscle, boom, the brain just exploded. So I've had many experiences when I was younger where I really felt, and this is what's different from most people, not that I was somewhere or someone else or experiencing the multiverse, where I felt I was actually in my own skin versus the rest of my life feeling like I'm not really here fully.
That's wild.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I'm a big believer in microdosing.
Near-death experience survivors. Near-death experience survivors hate Earth when they come back. They're like, this is the fucking fantasy. This is not reality. Where I went, that was reality. This is all just bullshit, storyland. This is not real, which is why they suffer these effects trying to get back to the feeling and being back where they were before, and different issues because, they're very detached from the here and now because they've sort of experienced it. And every medium I've ever met and psychic I've ever met, like a lot of them have had near-death experiences before they got their abilities. The ones that say no, I'm like, really? Ask your parents. They're like, oh my God, I was dead for 2 minutes when I came out when I was born. I had to be revived. Or, oh my God, I choked on something when I was a baby and then they had to slap my back, bring me back to life. So there is a connection, I think, with somehow, and this could be trauma, this could be, death, this could be, I think, psychedelics. There is a way to get those, consciousness fucking, data.
I think the term is called neutral energy. When I could be wrong on this, but I think it's neutral energy when it talks about just the various brain firing synapses, neurons doing their thing, right. And fungi, essentially increasing that neutral energy in the brain. It's actually pretty wild.
So listen, Mark, first of all, thank you. We've been here for over an hour and I really appreciate your time. I got one more question for you that I'd love to know. As someone who did on Skinwalker so many experiments, and someone who really obviously has a passion, what do you want to, what's something you'd want to do next? Like, what is the thing you'd want to test or try, or what is that one thing? How do you keep the love of this passion you're in and progress it?
Honestly, the next thing that I would really like to try to do is some form of verifiable interaction with the UAP.
You mean one that we're not firing rockets at?
Right, maybe that one. Right. I mean, we saw these at Skinwalker Ranch all the time. The spherical UAP that seemed to appear and disappear whenever something was going on, as if to check on, is this an issue or not? I think that those are, whatever's not us, whatever's not man-made.
What's UAP? Is this the new way to say UFO?
Yeah, it's a new way to say. Dude, they just released a video. Of course, it was overshadowed by everything going on, but I think it was the 9th of September, they released literally one of the greatest videos of UAPs we could see. And what are they doing? They're shooting fucking missiles at it. And it's insane. It hits
what was it called? What does UAP stand for?
Unidentified aerial phenomena.
Unidentified aerial phenomena.
There's actually a new term. It's
new. Yeah.
Okay. But there's another new one. So that but okay. How do we know what we're looking at is a UAP, or how do we know we're not just looking at a test of the Hellfire missile trying to connect with a different kind of target, and it's being fed to somebody to make everybody think it's UFOs. I mean, this is what Richard Doty and these guys did back in, post Cold War, and it's part of Mirage Men, just feeding people UFO stuff to try to use it to bring out spies, so we can find out who the spies are, or to throw China or Russia off a track of development. There's a The thing is, whenever the government releases something, I never take it at face value. I mean, for something to be released, it's usually that's a multi-year process with a lot of bureaucracy, red tape. There's a proposal for an action. There's approvals. There's everything from the forum and to whatever the theater is, and the casting, and whatever it is. Things don't just go out like that fast. It's a long process, which means many people are involved. And we know that the way that the government is compartmentalized for strategic purposes is this guy. They have no idea why this guy is giving it to him, and he's got to give it to that guy or to say it's going out. So without knowing true motivations, even whistleblowers, and I'm never going to come down and say these guys aren't legit. I 100% believe the whistleblowers, but I do know that I've been told that sometimes whistleblower um, testimony is a way in which people in government, politics, or the military can legally and safely open the books for organizations that they can't get access to otherwise. Whistleblower comes out and says Lockheed Martin has UFOs. Suddenly Congress says, well, we demand an investigation. And now the government entities who thought Lockheed Martin was wasting a ton of money and stealing taxpayer money can actually go and look and see what their budget is and what they're spending the money on. But they have no access to it otherwise. They're not allowed to. So sometimes these are not even individuals as much as groups. This is the plan. This is why this person comes forward. That's their duty, their job. Sometimes they're pushed towards that, maybe without even knowing that it's under someone else's need. Sometimes it's all completely random and nobody's got any control over it whatsoever. But, I just don't think as a country, we've been able to stay so safe, well guarded, have the freedoms and liberties that we've had without there being a lot of work going on that we'll never know about from people who are running the country, that maybe sometimes bleeds into this stuff and or doesn't.
I like how we're ended on America.
Yeah, America.
Like
You
Hey,
know, I don't like I always
$10,000 on the
say
toilet seat,
one of the things
5,000 on
that
those
happened.
paper cups.
Well, one thing that happened at Skinwalker Ranch, and I was always very cognizant of this. I'd never want to be the person responsible for capturing footage of something that is, a important piece of military technology development, and I become the reason why, the rest of the world gets it.
Yeah, it's in a very same way. It would be like the videos of those adults who capture the foul balls and steal it out of the hands of the child, right?
Yep.
Right? It's like that's Mark Marinaccio actually capturing UAP that turns out to be some high level national defense secret.
Well,
is the
that's
same as
right.
stealing the ball out of a child's hands, and now we're
I mean,
all
that's
doomed.
the issue. That's the issue with the field, is that the enthusiasm, the childlike giddiness, the pure, joy and fun and mind-bending ideas that come from exploring this. You have to keep in mind not everybody's out to get you because they're keeping something private or secret. Anything that I get, everybody in the world's going to get, including North Korea, Russia, China, right? I mean, I may not personally agree with tactics and operations, but it's also not for me to say. I sleep under the blanket of freedom they provide, and not necessarily going to question the manner in which
I
they
just got
provide
a
it.
chill of America going on. Do you guys feel that?
It's a few good men.
You
It's a
feel
few good
that
men.
American chill?
Yep.
Woo!
But it is tough. Like, I mean, because you see people who are like, the public has a right to know. I'm like, says who?
Uh.
That's you deciding what information should come out.
No, people can't handle it, dude. Listen, one thing I've learned being in this world too, and watching, like, just hearing the questions and seeing the fans, is that America's pretty dumb. Like, we're dumb, and intelligence is a bell curve, and that peak is narrowing, and there's a lot of dumb on this side, and it's they don't need to know. They shouldn't. They can't know. It'll just won't go
I will say
well.
this, and I learned this from guys that we had on the ranch, military guys, and other people I've talked to before and after that. A lot of the issue with government disclosure of video and images has nothing to do with what they captured, but it's the technology we used to capture it. Just by showing video of a UAP, China, Russia, whoever, they can figure a lot out that, not only puts us at risk technologically, but it could put servicemen, it could put, operators, it could put people at risk, because maybe now they can figure out how much we can see into their, into their country or other places where we're in conflict. The Tic Tac was shot in 2002, and we got it in 2017. And when those guys came to Skinwalker Ranch, they said, the UAPX guys who saw the Tic Tac and tracked it and clocked it, they said, look, we can talk about anything from that day except the technology used to capture the Tic Tac. And I think that's important for people to know. It's
that's a really interesting interesting point, right? It's not
just about the thing. It's the thing that caught the thing.
It's the thing that caught the thing. Yeah.
That's
wild.
We see this with our day to day. And like, for example, we all have microwaves in our house, correct? Microwaves. That came from NASA. That was a NASA invention that we didn't get in the general public until way, way later. Same thing.
Dude, those sons of bitches were making us take an hour to make a baked potato, man.
Dude,
we could have been doing it in 2 minutes.
Have you guys ever heard of shark fittings? Shark fittings. You guys ever hear of these?
No.
If you're a plumber,
What is it?
basically what a shark fitting is, it's a quick connect to copper pipe or Plex pipe or some sort of PVC. It's a quick connect. It literally takes, you cut, you clean, you push in. It takes no brains and knocks the time of fixing a leak down from 20 minutes to under 3 minutes. It is quick. I think that technology came about back in 2015, 2014, available to the public, but NASA's had it since the 60s. And those are just two small examples.
That's crazy. But you think about microwaves. If microwaves came out too early, everyone would be cooking themselves.
Everyone would be cooking themselves.
Without all the safeguards.
Right.
And
you have to put tags on it.
These are just simple things, right?
For public use to know that it wasn't dangerous.
Yeah. And those are just simple things. Imagine the big things.
You develop a technology that becomes military. You have X amount of time for military use before you are able to take it to the public for consumer commercial use.
Yeah. It's very wild to think of. That's a great point, Mark, about the whole technology, man. That's a wild point.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see that if one day the tech actually catches up to what we're all trying to do here when we're exploring for the consumer, I guess, calling us the consumers, because I always say, look, guys, man, if we had tech that could talk to ghosts, the world as we know it would change. So don't sit there and think that we're actually talking to ghosts from an app on our phone. It's a tool like any other tool that's a piece of a puzzle that we can see in a picture that we have to put together and think about until we really have, all of the pieces put together. Maybe can give us some idea of what might be.
I actually don't think the apps on the phone are that bad, because it's not like it's technology that has transmitters, receivers, capacitors.
No, I think they're great. They're like John. When I use them, I get nothing. When John uses them, he gets a really dude. It's crazy specific. This all leads to his magnetic things that I don't understand. I think he's a witch, but that's just me. But it's sort of this vibe of. I think it's a piece of a puzzle. Like it's giving you painting you a picture that we need other things to fill out. Mark, thank you so much. I mean, it was really great. We can sit here all day. We'll have to have you back on as we learn more and keep going on this, and any other things you work on or books or things like that, man. It's like, we want to read them. We want to talk about them. It's really fascinating. You have a deep love for this stuff, and it was really great to have you on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys. It was a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, man, definitely. It's been fun.
Well, that's it for another episode of Splintered Spirits. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, stay curious.